All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive. Today's topic is one you guys picked out, brain size.
Always a fascinating one.
It is. And we're going to be digging into this whole idea. The bigger the brain, the smarter the person. We're using that Wikipedia article on brain size that one of you sent in. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for sending that in.
Get ready for some serious myth busting because what we found, well, it might just surprise you.
Definitely a topic full of surprises. People make a lot of assumptions about brain size and intelligence, but we'll see. It's a lot more complicated.
Okay, so before we get into all the crazy stuff, let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
How do scientists even measure brain size? Do they just, I don't know, pull out a tape measure?
Not quite.
Okay.
They use something called cranial capacity.
Cranial capacity.
Yeah, it's basically the volume inside your skull measured in cubic centimeters. So it gives us a rough estimate of brain size. But of course, it's not a perfect measure of intelligence, right? It's like judging a book by its cover. You get an idea of its size, but you don't know what's actually inside.
I like that analogy.
It's a good one.
So what's the average human brain weight then? Just so we have a baseline for all this brain size talk.
Well, on average, an adult human brain weighs about 1.5 kilograms, or about 3.3 pounds. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? This incredibly complex organ controlling everything you do, and it only weighs about as much as, I don't know, a small chihuahua.
Wow, that's lighter than I expected. Okay, so how did our brains get to this size? Did our ancient ancestors have teeny tiny pea brains?
Well, actually, brain size has generally increased throughout human evolution.
It has.
Yeah. So if we go way back to our early hominid ancestors like Homo habilis, their brains were only around 600 cubic centimeters.
Oh, what?
Tiny. But then, as humans evolved, so did our brains. They got bigger.
Okay.
Homo erectus, for example, had brains around 1250 cubic centimeters. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Ooh, I love interesting. Tell me.
Neanderthals.
Oh, the Neanderthals, our extinct cousins.
Exactly. They actually had even bigger brains than modern humans.
Really?
Yeah, about 1680 cubic centimeters.
Wait, hold up. Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. But weren't they the stereotypical cavemen?
Exactly. And that's where a lot of our misconceptions about brain size and intelligence come from, right? We think, oh, bigger automatically equals smarter.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's not necessarily true. Neanderthals likely needed those larger brains for different reasons. They had more robust bodies, different visual systems, and they lived in harsher environments.
So it's not just about the size of the brain, but how it's adapted to their specific needs environment.
Precisely. And there's another twist to the human brain size story.
Okay, lay it on me.
Recent research suggests that over the past 3,000 years, human brains have actually gotten slightly smaller.
Wait, what? Smaller? Are we de-evolving? Should I be worried?
Haha, no need to panic.
Yeah.
This finding is still being debated. And there are a few theories about why this might be happening. One idea is that as human societies got more complex, we started relying more on shared knowledge and social structures, right? So instead of each individual needing to know everything, we could rely on others in our community.
So it's we offloaded some of our brain power to, the group, kind of like having a giant external hard drive for our species.
Exactly. It's a really intriguing idea. So this theory suggests that as our social structures became more sophisticated, our brains became slightly more efficient. And we're using less physical space for storing information.
That's wild. So it's all about efficiency, right? Like a well-organized closet.
I like that.
Okay, so I'm still a little confused about this whole brain size and intelligence thing. Is there actually a connection, or is it all just a myth?
There is a correlation between brain size and intelligence, but it's not a simple, direct relationship.
Okay.
Studies have shown that people with larger brains, they do tend to score higher on intelligence tests.
Okay.
But it's only one piece of a much larger puzzle.
All right, so if it's not just about size, what else matters when it comes to intelligence? What's going on inside those brains of ours?
Well, one important factor is neuron density. So that's the concentration of nerve cells in your brain. You could have a bigger brain, but if those connections aren't dense and efficient, it might not actually translate into higher intelligence.
Oh, so it's kind of like quality over quantity, like a tightly packed network of brain cells versus a sprawling but like sparsely populated one.
Exactly. And it's not just about, the density of those connections. It's the way those connections are structured, how they're organized. That also plays a crucial role. Think of it like a computer.
Okay.
Processing power isn't just about the size of the hard drive, right?
Yeah,
It's also about the speed of the processor, the efficiency of the software.
makes sense. Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. So we've got brain size, neuron density, and the way those neurons are connected, all kind of contributing to intelligence. Anything else we should add to this mix?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most exciting areas of research right now is neuroplasticity.
Okay, break that down for me.
So it's basically the brain's ability to physically change and adapt throughout our lives.
Hold on. Our brains can actually change. That's incredible. Tell me more.
It is. It is remarkable. Studies have shown that when you learn new skills, like playing an instrument, learning a new language, it can actually alter the physical structure of your brain, increasing gray matter volume in specific regions.
So basically, our brains are like muscles. We can work them out by learning new things and make them stronger.
In a way, yeah. The more we challenge ourselves intellectually, the more those neural connections, they strengthen and grow. And that means intelligence is not fixed. It's this dynamic process we can influence throughout our lives.
Okay, that's pretty empowering. So all those years of playing video games weren't a total waste of time.
Haha. Depends on the video game.
Fair enough.
But the point is that any activity that challenges you mentally, it can have a positive impact on your brain. And that actually brings us to a really interesting point. Humans aren't the only ones with amazing brains.
Right.
We need to zoom out and talk about brain size in the animal kingdom for a bit.
Yes. I'm all about animals. We always think we're like the smartest species on Earth. We're like, but do we actually have the biggest brains?
That's a great question. And the answer might surprise you. Humans actually don't have the largest brains on Earth.
Oh, really?
That honor goes to the sperm whale.
The sperm whale?
Yeah, whose brains can weigh up to a whopping 8 kilograms. That's more than 5 times heavier than the average human brain.
Whoa, a sperm whale brain is heavier than a bowling ball.
It's massive.
But sperm whales are also enormous. Does that mean, like, bigger animals just automatically have bigger brains?
Not necessarily. Scientists use something called the brain-to-body mass ratio to compare brain size across different species. This helps account for the fact that larger animals generally need larger brains, just to control their larger bodies.
It's all relative, right? Like a mouse might have a tiny brain, but it could be pretty impressive for its size.
Exactly. And when we look at this brain-to-body mass ratio, humans still come out on top, but not by as much as you might think. We're followed closely by dolphins and other primates.
Okay.
Interestingly, there's this general pattern that governs brain size in mammals, a kind of power law. As body size increases, brain size also increases, but at a slower rate.
So if an animal doubles in size, its brain doesn't necessarily double in size.
You got it. The brain size increase is proportional, but not 1-to-1. But here's the fascinating part. Primates, including us, we break this rule.
Oh, we're rebels. I like it.
Our brains are 5 to 10 times larger than would be predicted based on our body size alone.
So we're overachievers in the brain department. But why?
Uh-huh.
What makes primates so special?
Well, there are lots of theories, of course.
Right.
But it probably comes down to our complex social structures, our ability to use tools, our need to adapt to constantly changing environments. All these things likely pushed our brains to become larger and more complex over time.
Makes sense. So while size matters, it's not the whole story, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about how that brain is structured, connected, and adapted to the needs of the species.
Exactly. And that brings us to some real surprises in the animal kingdom, We tend to think of ourselves as the most intelligent species.
Right, of course.
But there are some animals out there that challenge that assumption, even with their relatively small brains.
Like who? Give me some examples.
Well, have you ever heard of the island syndrome?
Island syndrome? No, but it sounds intriguing. Tell me everything.
It describes how animals living on islands often evolve differently than their mainland counterparts.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes they get bigger, sometimes they get smaller. It all depends on the resources available and the pressures they face. One really striking example is Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit.
A hobbit?
Yeah. They lived on an island in Indonesia, and they were much smaller than modern humans. And get this. Their brains were incredibly small, too, about the size of a chimpanzee's.
Whoa, so island life can shrink your brain.
It seems so. It's thought that the limited resources and lack of predators on the island, it might have led to this reduction in brain size over time. But here's the kicker. Despite their small brains, Homo floresiensis were still able to make tools and hunt.
Wow, that's wild. So even a small brain can be pretty powerful if it's wired the right way.
Absolutely. It really highlights the amazing adaptability of evolution. But Homo floresiensis, they aren't the only ones challenging our assumptions about brain size and
I'm
intelligence.
ready for more. Hit me with it.
Let's talk about birds.
Birds.
Yeah, specifically crows, ravens, and gray parrots.
Oh, yeah, I've heard they're pretty smart.
They are. These birds are known for their remarkable intelligence. They can solve complex problems, they use tools, and they even communicate in ways that rival some primates.
Wait a minute. Birds with these small brains are outsmarting some of our primate cousins. How's that even possible?
Well, it's a reminder that intelligence takes many forms. While brain size plays a role, factors like neuron density, brain structure, and the way different brain regions are connected, those are equally important. These birds have incredibly efficient and specialized brains that allow them to perform remarkable feats, despite their small size.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. This is all making me realize that there's so much more to intelligence than just brain size.
You got it. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating, you know? We're constantly learning new things about the brain, and it keeps challenging our assumptions about what it means to be intelligent. It really is amazing, like, how much we're still figuring out about brains. It's like we've only just scratch the surface.
I know, it's seriously making me question, like, everything I thought I knew about intelligence.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. It's making me think, are we even measuring intelligence the right way? Are there, like, other forms of intelligence that we're not even considering?
Those are great questions. And honestly, like, we don't have all the answers yet.
Right.
But one thing that's becoming increasingly clear is that intelligence isn't just about, one single thing, like brain size.
Okay, yeah.
It's a complex interplay of a bunch of different factors.
So back to those brainy birds for a second.
Okay.
You mentioned crows, ravens, and parrots. But are there any other animals that, like, show us that size isn't everything?
Tons. Absolutely. So many examples out there. Take the octopus, for instance.
The octopus.
Yeah. They're incredibly intelligent creatures, capable of, like, problem-solving, tool use, and even complex communication.
Okay.
And their brains, they're distributed throughout their bodies, not just concentrated in their heads.
Hold on. Their brains are in their arms. That's wild.
I know. It's crazy, right? So they have a central brain in their head, but then they also have these clusters of neurons in each of their arms.
What? Yeah.
Which gives them this remarkable degree of autonomy and flexibility.
So it's like each arm has its own, like, mini brain?
In a way, yeah. And that allows them to do some really incredible things. They can use their arms to explore their environment, manipulate objects, and even change, like, their color and texture to camouflage themselves.
Okay. That's officially the coolest thing I've learned all day.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm starting to think we humans are kind of boring with our, like, single centralized brain.
Well, don't underestimate the power of the human brain. But you're right. It's fascinating to see how differently intelligence has evolved in other species. It really expands our understanding of what's possible.
Speaking of expanding our understanding,
Right.
before we move on, you mentioned something earlier about the island syndrome.
Yes.
Can we kind of circle back to that?
Of course.
I'm really curious about those hobbits with, the chimp-sized brains.
It's a fascinating phenomenon.
It is.
And it's not just limited to Homo floresiensis. There are many examples of island-dwelling species evolving in unusual ways.
Right.
Sometimes it's about body size, sometimes it's about brain size,
Yeah.
It all just depends on those specific environmental pressures.
So if you, like, stick a bunch of animals on an island and leave them there for a few thousand years, they might come back looking totally different.
Essentially, yeah. It's kind of like this natural experiment in evolution, right?
Yeah.
And it really highlights how adaptable life can be.
Okay, so back to the hobbits.
Yes.
You mentioned they were still able to, like, make tools and hunt, even with their small brains.
Right.
But what about their other cognitive abilities? Were they as intelligent as, other humans?
That's a question that's still being debated.
Okay.
We don't have a ton of evidence to go on, but some researchers believe that, their small brain size might have limited their cognitive abilities in certain ways.
So maybe they weren't writing poetry or composing symphonies,
Yeah.
but they were still figuring out how to, survive and thrive in their environment.
Exactly. And that's a real testament to just, like, the remarkable adaptability of the brain.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and go back to that brain-to-body mass ratio we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember where humans actually fall on that scale.
Yeah.
Are we at the top?
We're up there, but we're not. Like, The absolute champions. As I mentioned before, shrews actually have the highest brain-to-body mass ratio among mammals.
Shrews. Just
Yeah.
tiny little, like, mouse-like creatures.
Yeah,
I would not have guessed that.
I know. It's surprising. But their high brain-to-body mass ratio really reflects the intense cognitive demands of their lifestyle.
Right.
They have incredibly high metabolisms and they need to eat almost constantly.
Yeah.
They're also, on the lookout for predators all the time, and they need to navigate these complex environments.
So those little guys are running around with, like, supercharged brains.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it shows that even, a tiny brain can be incredibly powerful if it's wired for the right tasks.
All right, so we've established that, brain size is important, but it's not the only thing that determines intelligence, right?
Right.
And that there are all sorts of incredible adaptations out there in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to us humans for a second.
Okay.
We talked earlier about how human brain size has actually decreased over the past, few thousand years.
Right.
Do we know, anything more about why that might be happening?
It's still a bit of a mystery,
Okay.
but there are some really fascinating theories out there. One idea, which we touched on a bit earlier, is that it's related to the increasing complexity of human societies.
Okay.
As we started living in, larger, more interconnected groups, we became more reliant on shared knowledge and social structures.
So instead of, each individual needing to, hold all the information, we could rely on others in our community. Kind of like a collective brain.
Exactly. And some researchers think that this shift towards more collaborative thinking might have allowed our brains to become slightly more efficient. So they're using less physical space to store information.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. But if our brains are, shrinking, does that mean we're getting dumber? Should we be concerned about this trend?
Not necessarily.
Okay, good.
Remember, brain size is only one part of the picture, and some researchers actually believe that this shift toward, smaller, more efficient brains might actually be a sign of increased cognitive flexibility and adaptability.
So instead of being a sign of, decline, it could actually be a sign of progress.
That's one way to look at it. It suggests that our brains are evolving to meet the demands of our changing world.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little better about my average size noggin. But I have to ask,
Yeah.
what about all those headlines we see about, technology making us lazy and dumbing us down? Is there, any truth to that?
That's a really complex issue, and there are no easy answers, to be honest. Technology definitely has the potential to change the way we think and learn,
For sure.
but it also has the potential to enhance our cognitive abilities in new and exciting ways.
So it's all about how we use it.
Right, exactly. Technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us to use it wisely, responsibly.
That's a great point. We need to be mindful of, the potential downsides, but also embrace, the possibilities that technology offers.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the most exciting things about technology is that it allows us to study the brain in ways that were never possible before.
Oh, tell me more about that. What kind of research is being done?
Well, there are all sorts of really incredible advances happening in neuroscience.
Okay.
For example, there are new imaging techniques that allow us to see the brain in action, so we can watch how different regions communicate with each other as we think and learn and experience the world.
That's incredible. It's like having, a window into the inner workings of our minds.
It really is, and it's leading to some really groundbreaking discoveries about, how the brain works and what makes us who we are.
Okay, so we've talked about how, brain size is important, but it's not the whole story when it comes to intelligence. We've explored the, incredible diversity of brains in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
And learned how even, small brains can be really powerful. And we've discussed how human brains have been evolving over time, potentially becoming smaller but more efficient.
Right.
Is there anything else we should, cover before we wrap up this deep dive? I think we've, covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is there anything, we can actually do to boost our own brain power besides, throwing out our smartphones and living like cavemen?
Haha. Yeah, that's a great question. And luckily for us, becoming a Luddite isn't our only option.
Good.
Remember that whole concept of neuroplasticity we talked about?
Yeah.
Your brain's always changing, it's adapting, and you actually have the power to influence that process.
So what can we actually do to, keep our brains sharp, adaptable? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, it's not rocket science, really. A lot of the things that are good for your overall health are also good for your brain.
Yeah, for sure.
Things like getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and exercising regularly.
Okay, that's pretty standard advice. Anything like more specific to brain health?
Absolutely. One of the best things you can do for your brain is to keep learning new things.
Okay.
It could be anything, really. Learning a new language, taking up a new hobby, reading challenging books, even just having, stimulating conversations.
Right.
Anything that gets you out of your comfort zone and forces you to think in new ways.
So basically, keep those brains buzzing.
Right.
Don't let them get lazy.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to challenge yourself, The more you kind of push your brain, the stronger and more adaptable it will become.
That's good to hear. I was starting to feel like my brain was on a downward spiral, but now I'm realizing it's actually a lot more resilient than I thought.
It really is. Your brain's an amazing organ, and it has this potential to just keep growing and changing, throughout your whole life.
Okay, so to wrap up this amazing deep dive, let's revisit some of those key takeaways.
Right.
We busted the myth that brain size is the only measure of intelligence. We learned that intelligence is this complex interplay of all these different factors: brain structure, neuron density, the way those neurons are connected.
Right.
And we explored the amazing diversity of brains across the animal kingdom, discovering that even small brains can be incredibly powerful.
And perhaps most importantly, I think, we learned that intelligence isn't fixed.
Right.
Your brain has this amazing ability to change and adapt, throughout your entire life.
Yeah.
So keep learning, keep challenging yourself, and just keep exploring the world around you.
That's fantastic advice. I'm feeling inspired to go out and learn something new right now. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of brain size. It's been a real mind bender.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the exploration doesn't have to end here, There's still so much to discover about the brain. Who knows what amazing insights we'll uncover in the years to come.
All right, and that's our deep dive for today. Make sure you stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be tackling another fascinating topic. See you then.